Okay, we're doing Best of the West Part 9 in Art, Music, Movies by me, Pete Rogers. We're on page 76, and it's basically summarizing the best things that have ever been done in Western civilization. The best novel ever written by a Frenchman was Les Mis by Victor Hugo. Masterpiece. Okay. The Bishop forgiving Jean Valjean. Jean Valjean going on to become the great man is magnificent. The best musical version of it is the 1985 musical. It's fantastic. Okay, best Italian novel is Pinocchio. Okay, by Carlo Collodi. The best illustrated version of it is Roberto Innocenti. Okay, the best Russian history book ever written is Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Okay, he had been like a tank captain, squadron commander, you know, conquered Germany, expected to come back as a hero, but then, he pissed off Stalin by, making some comments, and he got put in the gulag for a long time. Finally got out, wrote this magnificent book. So it's a masterpiece. Tells you the truth. And what does he say? What is it that destroyed Russia? What is it that led to the death of 65 million Christians and burning down of 48,000 churches? He says it's atheism. Atheism is what enables all the evil to happen because it degrades the value of the individual man, says that life has no meaning. Therefore, the rulers, the equivalent of God on earth, can do whatever they want. And they often are not that nice. Okay, best Irish playwright ever, Oscar Wilde. His best play would be The Importance of Being Earnest, and he's very quotable. He was also fantastic in conversation. I loved him for being an Irishman who goes to England and he dominates the literary scene, the theater scene. He's a bit of a stupid jerk. He became an alcoholic, left his wife and kids, and kind of ended up in disgrace. Was a Catholic, but anyways, The Importance of Being Earnest is magnificent. He's got a lot of great quotes too. Best Russian novelist from the 1800s, and his best novel was Brothers Karamazov. Was his best novel. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Okay, he said so many great things. We are all responsible for everyone, and I am more responsible than anyone else. If there is no God, then anything is permitted. The chapter Grand Inquisitor is a masterpiece. The greatest chapter in any novel ever written is The Grand Inquisitor and Brothers Karamazov. Best American poet of the 1800s, Edgar Allan Poe. His two best poems are Annabel Lee. It was many, many a year ago in a kingdom by the sea that a maiden there lived whom you may know, whose name was Annabel Lee. I was a child and she was a child. I had to remember that for high school. I still remember it. That's how useful rhyme is. You can still remember something from 40 years ago. The Raven's magnificent. The great version of The Raven with the Simpsons as the characters. I think Bart was the Raven, something like that. Homer was the guy reading the poem. The best modern American male novel writer is Tom Wolfe. Very clever, very skilled with punctuation, onomatopoeia, and he's a good guy. He's trying to do what's good. Best American female writer in the 1900s would be Ayn Rand. Okay, she's an absolute genius, smartest woman who ever lived. Her best novel was Atlas Shrugged. Ann Coulter, the best American female writer in the 2000s, Debbie Ann Coulter. She's also a genius, and she's very funny. She's funnier than Ayn Rand, but Ayn Rand's a deeper thinker. Best female writer of history, Edith Hamilton. She wrote, the Greek Way, the Roman Way. She wrote Greek mythology book. So this is all the best of the best stuff. The best male historical fiction writer would be Tom Clancy. Best male philosopher, Aristotle. Okay, Ayn Rand's the best female philosopher who ever lived. Here's a couple comments of Ayn Rand on Aristotle. She says, if there is a philosophical atlas who carries the whole of Western civilization on his shoulders, it is Aristotle. Whatever intellectual progress men have achieved rests on his achievements. Okay, Aristotle was teaching in the schools for 1,500 years. Okay, and that was good. They needed to add stuff to it, but Aristotle was a good foundation. Ayn Rand, Aristotle is the father of individualism. Oh, here's a quote from Aristotle. Ordinary words convey only what we already know. It is from a metaphor that we can best get hold of something new. Let's see. Ayn Rand, the thinking man who is educated, intelligent, and hardworking is the motor of the world. The best of the Greek myths would be Prometheus. He's a guy who didn't know what was going on. He ended up sleeping with his mother. He didn't know, though. He got tricked into the whole thing. It was just his fate. And there's a whole big story behind Prometheus. His daughter was Antigone. Okay, Theseus welcomed him back into Athens. The best Greek allegory, of course, is Plato's Cave by Plato. The idea of, most of the pros are looking at fake stuff on the wall rather than going out in the sunlight, seeing the real world. Best Greek wife is Alcestis. She gave her life for her husband. Then Hercules wrestled death in order to save her life. Okay, what a wife. Best book for becoming more powerful. This guy, 48 Rules of Power. Now, this author, Robert Greene, he's kind of sinister. He's kind of a sneaky guy. He says a lot of stuff that's not true, but he's also brilliant. And this is a brilliant book. I think every man should read this book because he tells you the truth, how stuff goes down. Okay? And that's valuable to know because you go to public schools, you just get told all this nonsense all day. And the average pro thinks that people care about them and like them or trying to help them. No, 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 no. The pros are farm animals and they want to reduce the number of them. Okay, that's reality. And the pros should know that. So once you realize they're on your own, then you got a chance to figure out what's the best you can do. But if you think the system is going to help you, I think you're going to be very disappointed. Okay, what's the best European political painting? That would be The Fall of Poland by Jan Matejko. Jan Matejko is a magnificent Polish artist. He's one of the greatest artists ever from Europe. And this is also called Upadek Polski, The Fall of Poland in Polish. Reitan is this man here. So basically the elites had sold out Poland for money and they were going to partition it, like between Russia and Germany and Austria. And Reitan, this great Polish man, he said, no, 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 go ahead, kill me, but do not kill Poland. Do not sell out, because once the elites left this room, the deal would be finalized. So he laid down at the exit of the room, and he said, don't do this. They have the mercenary foreigners there to bump him off if he persists. You can see there's a spilled purse on the ground showing how they've been bought off. But it's a magnificent thing, because it really symbolizes what happened to Poland, what happens to so many countries, what's happening to the West right now, to Europe, to some extent to the USA as well. Okay, he ripped his shirt and laid on the ground in protest and tried to block them. Okay, best ancient Rome story. The Romans were very heroic in the time of the Republic. And, the founding fathers of the USA based America primarily on the Roman Republic. Not so much on democracy. They weren't that impressed by Plato. Plato had wimped out and become too big of a fan of Sparta, which is collectivist, no good. Thomas Jefferson described Plato as mostly a fraud with regard to his political knowledge in the Republic, because he was too enamored of Sparta because they had defeated Athens in the Peloponnesian War. Okay, so anyways, here's a magnificent Roman story that all schoolboys knew up until about 1900. Horatius at the Tiber Bridge. Lars Porsena, the leader of the Etruscans, they were attacking Rome and trying to put it under siege. And if they got over this bridge, Rome was not ready to defend itself. So Horatius, with just his sword in hand, fought off a bunch of Etruscans, was wounded several times. Then he dives into the Tiber River, and this gave the other Roman men time to disassemble the bridge so that the Etruscans could not get up close to Rome. And so Horatius had saved Rome. So this is a painting by Charles Le Brun from 1643. Okay, and then here's part of a poem by Thomas Babington Macaulay. By the way, Thomas Babington Macaulay, an Englishman, he wrote a history of England, in the late 1600s, and it was so popular, everybody wanted to read it, okay? And that's their attitude, okay? Nowadays, I've written this history of the Western world, and nobody wants to read it. That's because people have lost interest in their history. Because America's fading out, all the West is fading out because the men have been feminized and pussified and bought into all this gaslighting crap. But anyways, let's just hear the beginning of this poem here. Then out spoke brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth, death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? Okay. That's the attitude of ancient Rome. And check out the story of Mucius, okay, what he did with the Etruscans, okay, it's great. The best ancient Roman to learn from is you want to study Cicero. All of ancient Rome can be described related to Cicero. He is the cornerstone between the fall of the Republic and the transition into the empire. And he's connected to all of these guys. Here's Marc Antony, to Julius Caesar, to Pompey, to Octavian Caesar, Augustus. Okay, so here is Cleopatra in 41 BC. She must have been a babe and a half. Julius Caesar had gone out with her. And then Marc Antony fell in love with her, and he was totally pee-whipped. And this painting was made in 1885 by Lawrence Tadema. He was a great artist of painting ancient Roman scenes. But Marc Antony, being so whipped for Cleopatra, kind of turned him into a wimp, and he lost in the naval battle of Actium to Octavian, and that was pretty much the end of him. I don't really like Marc Antony too much. He made a good speech after the death of Julius Caesar, and he did have reason to be pissed off with Cicero, but I don't like what he did to Cicero. Cicero was the greatest of all Romans. He kind of ruined that. Okay, I think we got a little more. We're almost done here for today. Okay, who's the best high school teacher ever in the history of the United States? John Taylor Gatto. He wrote a bunch of really good books about education, and he tells the truth about education, how the school system is just made to dumb down the students and not to help them. It's ridiculous. What do you remember from grade school and high school? Nothing, except how to type and maybe one teacher that was nice to you. That's it. Driver's ed. Okay, that's it. I've asked a whole bunch of people that question. I always get that same answer. Best professor at thegreatcourses.com, Rufus Fears. He's magnificent. He's his Harvard-trained history professor. He later on taught at University of Indiana. They could never find an auditorium big enough to hold all the students that would go to his classes. He's great. He not only knows a lot and presents it well, but he's enthusiastic. He's entertaining. He's nice. He's magnificent. Okay, best medical painting, The Wards of St. John's. Just making the point, the Catholic Church started everything. It started the university system. It started making these good hospitals. Romans didn't care, about the regular people. Okay, The Wards of St. John Hospital by John Beerblock, 1778. Catholic Church built the big hospitals, built the big charities, like the book by Thomas Woods, How the Catholic Church Built Western Civilization. It's true. It did. Go ahead, study it. You'll see it's true. Okay, why don't I have more stuff on music? I wanted to include some more stuff on music, but I only had 600 pages. And the way these books work is I initially thought I had like 650 pages of text, but when I edited it down, it ended up being about 550. But anyways, I wrote a separate book about best Christian songs if anybody's interested in that. I cataloged all the songs so that civilization can be reconstructed, hopefully, in case, everything in the West gets sacked and destroyed. The Gerbalists, man, they're destroying everything. So anyways, any young man who gets this is your legacy, your history. Here is a book about all the Christian songs that I summarized in alphabetical order by genre. Best legend of the Middle Ages, King Arthur. He's magnificent, kind of almost like another Christ figure. King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. Again, that question of fairness and meritocracy, beautiful and noble. The once and future king, protector of Britain. And there's all kinds of good love stories in there. Lancelot and Guinevere, that's not such a good one, but it's interesting. Tristram and Isolde, star-crossed lovers. Okay, best DVD course or audio on King Arthur. This lady, Dorsey Armstrong, for thegreatcourse.com, she did a great job with her King Arthur course. The best book on the Reformation, Luther by Metaxas. Metaxas is a current writer, and he's a real bright guy, and he's sort of a fan of Luther. I think Luther's a big jerk, but he's very interesting. Luther, was like the most entertaining of the Christian writers because he was so vituperative, always swearing and insulting people, but he was a jerk. I mean, he broke apart Christendom. And, you call him a friend of the peasants. No. He was a friend of the princes who protected him, and the peasants got destroyed because of him. All right, next one, Napoleon's Master by David Laude. Very good book on France and diplomacy. Napoleon's Master, okay. That one's worth knowing. Okay, if you're interested in French history, if you're interested in political history. Okay, best love poem, My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose, that's newly sprung in June. Robert Burns, the great Scottish poet. Best poem of mourning for a lost love, Edgar Allan Poe's Annabel Lee. Okay, best coming of age poem, If by Rudolph Kipling. Best nature poem, Tintern Abbey by William Wordsworth. Best poem about aging well, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night by Dylan Thomas. The best psychology and philosophy website, academyofideas.com. It's a magnificent one for psychology and for philosophy. Best website for self-education, probably the Wondrium or thegreatcourses.com. They used to be good. They're kind of going downhill. Anything that goes left turns into a piece of crap, and they're kind of going in that direction last I checked, but they used to be good. The best psychologist of the 1900s, Carl Rogers. I like his Rogerian technique of interview. But all psychology is pretty much of a joke, They've turned into a bunch of wimps, and they all go by whatever's the latest fad. And so, spare me with this pronoun nonsense. Okay, that's all part of the destruction of the West. Caldwell Esselstyn, best coronary artery disease physician. Best male art historian and critic from the 1800s, John Ruskin. His 1853 speech at the Pre-Raphaelite Brotherhood's magnificent. You just type that in your browser. John Ruskin, 1853 speech on the Pre-Raphaelites. There was a group of painters that were magnificent, and it's an awesome speech. It's the best speech ever made in the history of the world about art. Best female art historian, Sister Wendy. She's good. Best Irish history book, The Immortal Irishman by Timothy Egan. Great Irish hero. A little bit stupid, but they usually are, but he was great. Best Polish history book, Poland by James Michener. That's a great book. It basically tells you the history of Poland written from the perspective of family. Best German writer for quotes, Goethe. Okay. Best Frenchman for street smarts, Talleyrand. Talleyrand is the one I was referring to back in that book, Napoleon's Master. Okay, another one of these guys who had a difficult childhood. The family sent him to the priesthood because he had a club foot, and he just read a lot on his own, and he became this genius of Europe, genius of France. Okay, best Swiss man to study for psychology, Carl Jung. Carl Jung is good. They got good videos about him at the academyofideas.com. Good book about him by Anthony Stevens. Carl Jung did some good things, but he sort of goes halfway. Thomas Shaw takes it to a higher level. Okay. Best comic book series, Savage Sword of Conan is the best. Okay, best method to learn a foreign language, read bilingual fairy tales. Best way to lose weight, my book, Prevent and Reverse Obesity, study skills book, Underground Guide to Study Skills by me. But also I would say the Super Memory Super Student by Harry Lorraine. Best painting for ending this chapter. We're going to end it with this painting called The High Prayer with Christ by Eugene Brennan, 1901. Here we go. Let us pray. Dear God, please save Western civilization. Please save individual rights like free speech, the right to own property, the right to privacy, the right to make our own decisions, equality before the law, habeas corpus, the right to worship God as Christians, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, as it says in the Declaration of Independence. So that's it for today. I hope you found that helpful.